Commander Jack Thornton stared at the 12-armed alien ambassador and wondered, not for the first time, if retirement on a nice beach somewhere far, far away from any sentient life forms was overdue. His left eye had developed a twitch over the past 3 standard galactic months. His doctor called it a stress response. Jack called it the dealing with the dumbest federation in the universe syndrome. "So let me get this straight," Jack said, his voice carrying the forced calm of someone who had practiced meditation specifically for moments like this. "You're telling me that Colony Horizon, with its population of 30,000 human beings, was accidentally vaporized because someone in your filing department put it in the acceptable stellar testing grounds folder instead of the inhabited worlds, do not blow up folder?" Ambassador G. Thorak of the Pelunian sector blinked all 7 of his eyes in sequence, a gesture that Jack had learned meant mild embarrassment mixed with bureaucratic indifference. "A most unfortunate clerical error," G. Thorak said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into smooth English. "The Federation deeply regrets this administrative oversight." Behind Jack, Lieutenant Mei Wong made a noise that somehow combined a snort, a cough, and what might have been a suppressed scream. Jack didn't turn around. If he saw Wong's face right now, he might lose what little composure he had left. "Administrative oversight," Jack repeated. 30,000 people are dead because your filing system sucks." G. Thorak's appendages wiggled in what the diplomatic handbook described as a gesture of dismissal. "Commander Thornton, I understand human emotional attachment to single-instance biological units, but surely you recognize that in the greater galactic community, such incidents must be viewed in proper perspective." Jack's diplomatic translator earpiece helpfully informed him that single-instance biological units was bureaucratic Pelunian for living beings who don't upload backups of their consciousness. "And what, exactly, is the proper perspective?" Jack asked. "Well," G. Thorak said, consulting one of his many datapads, according to the Galactic Relative Value Index, 30,000 human lives equate to approximately 0.003% of one Federation resource unit. As compensation, we're prepared to offer Earth a full 0.005% through credit. Quite generous, by Federation standards. The conference room fell silent. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. "This meeting is adjourned," Jack finally said, his voice unnervingly level. G. Thorak appeared confused, all 7 eyes blinking out of sequence. "But we haven't completed the ritual of bureaucratic closure. There are 16 more forms to fill out, the ceremony of minor apology to perform, and—" "Get out," Jack said. "Commander," G. Thorak protested, "deviation from diplomatic protocol is a Class 3 infraction under." Jack stood up, towering over the squat alien, and leaned forward until his face was inches from G. Thorak's breathing membranes. I said, "Get out." G. Thorak hastily gathered his datapads. "The Federation will note this procedural violation in your permanent record," he muttered before scuttling out. As the door closed, Jack turned to face his team. 5 pairs of human eyes stared back at him, 5 faces showing the same mixture of outrage, disbelief, and bone-deep exhaustion that he felt in his own soul. "That's it," said Communications Specialist Raoul Patel, breaking the silence. "That's literally it. I can't do this anymore." Cultural Liaison Officer Dani Martinez nodded. 6 years of diplomatic service. 6 years of learning their ridiculous protocols. 6 years of filing everything in triplicate, performing their stupid ceremonies, and apologizing when they step on our toes. And for what? So they can accidentally destroy an entire colony and offer us pocket change as compensation. "Don't forget the ceremony of minor apology," added Security Chief Jonas Blake dryly. "We're missing out on that gem. It involves 7 hours of them humming at different frequencies while we stand in a pentagonal formation," Lieutenant Wong said. "I've seen it 3 times. Trust me, we're not missing anything." Jack looked at his team, this group of dedicated professionals who had spent years learning to navigate the absurd maze of Federation diplomacy. They had memorized the 17 different forms of Federation greetings. They had endured the ritual of preliminary discussion before every negotiation. They had spent countless hours filling out forms that asked for information like the emotional state of your third genetic contributor during your conception, and your preferred method of molecular decomposition upon final life cessation. And for what? So the Federation could obliterate 30,000 humans and call it a filing error? Protocol Officer Tasha Green, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Sir, what do we do?" Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her datapad. Jack Thornton had spent 15 years in diplomatic service, 15 years of smiling through gritted teeth, 15 years of explaining human concepts like personal space and maybe don't scan our reproductive organs during introductions, 15 years of being the calm, reasonable voice of humanity. He was done being reasonable. "Contact Earth," he said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. "Tell them everything. And add my personal recommendation." "Which is?" Tasha asked, already typing. Jack Thornton's diplomatic smile finally, completely cracked. "Tell them it's time to show the Federation what happens when humans stop being polite and start getting real." The emergency session of the United Earth Council was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. Gone were the measured tones and careful diplomatic language. Gone were the lengthy debates about protocol and proper approach. Instead, the chamber buzzed with a single, unified emotion: rage. "They what?" Admiral Eliza Martinez's voice cut through the murmurs like a laser through butter. Known throughout the fleet as "Don't call me Lizzie Martinez," she was not a woman accustomed to repeating herself. Jack cleared his throat. They classified the destruction of Colony Horizon as a clerical error and offered compensation equivalent to what we'd pay for a mid-range shuttlecraft. The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Martinez's face went through a fascinating journey from disbelief to fury to something almost serene. That last part worried Jack the most. "Chancellor," Martinez said, turning to the head of the council, "I believe we've been presented with what my great-grandmother would have called a come-to-Jesus moment." Chancellor Okonkwo nodded slowly. "Commander Thornton, in your 15 years of service, have you ever seen the Federation respond positively to our diplomatic efforts?" Jack thought about it. They did once agree to stop referring to humans as primitive meat bags with delusions of relevance in official communications. "And how long did that last?" the Chancellor asked. 3 days. Then they claimed their translator had a virus. Martinez stood up, her uniform crisp despite the 12-hour emergency flight from Mars Command. "Chancellor, members of the Council, I have spent my entire career advocating for peaceful coexistence with the Federation. I've defended their cultural differences and urged patience." She paused, her eyes hard. "I was wrong." A murmur ran through the chamber. "The Federation understands one thing," Martinez continued. "Power. They respect nothing else. Not kindness, not compromise, not reason. Just power." "What are you proposing, Admiral?" the Chancellor asked. Martinez smiled. It was not a nice smile, preparation enough already. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. All human diplomats were recalled from Federation space, trade agreements were suspended. Communication channels were shut down, except for a single line left deliberately open. "They're confused," Rahul said, monitoring the incoming transmissions. "They keep sending messages asking if our communication systems are experiencing biological degradation due to the inferior construction of human technology." "Let them wonder," Jack replied, watching as crews loaded equipment onto ships that had been quietly prepared over the past 6 hours. "What's the status of the package?" "Ready to deploy," Tasha said, looking up from her console, "though I still can't believe we're actually doing this." Jack understood her hesitation. For years, humanity had walked on eggshells around the Federation, always smiling, always accommodating, always taking the high road, not because humans were inherently diplomatic, but because the Federation had a technological advantage that made direct confrontation unwise. And so everyone had thought. "Admiral Martinez on secure channel," Lieutenant Wong announced. Martinez's face appeared on the main screen, her expression somewhere between grim and gleeful. "Is your team ready, Commander?" "Yes, ma'am." though I feel obligated to point out that this represents a significant deviation from established protocol. That's the point, Thornton, Martinez said. As of 0600 hours, Protocol 7B was officially replaced with Protocol FU. Jack raised an eyebrow. I'm not familiar with that one. Oh, what? It's new, Martinez said, her smile growing. The F stands for Federation, and the U stands for exactly what you think it does. Meanwhile, in the Grand Chamber of Bureaucratic Superiority, the Federation Council was in session. High Administrator ZKR addressed the assembled representatives from 500 worlds. These humans have violated 16 major protocols and 37 minor ones by recalling their diplomats without filing the proper departure notices, ZKTR fumed. They must be taught proper respect for procedure. Federation observer Zorn, one of the few who had actually studied human behavior beyond the mandatory handling primitive species course, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that destroying their colony has genuinely upset them. The chamber erupted in dismissive clicks and whistles. Absurd, ZKTR said. They are simply using this minor incident to avoid the annual renewal of the subjugation tax. We call it a protection fee when dealing with them, his assistant whispered. Whatever, ZKTR waved a tentacle dismissively. What can they possibly do? Their weapons are primitive, their ships are slow, and they still use biological bodies with no backups. They're no threat to us. As if on cue, every screen in the chamber suddenly went dark, only to relight with a simple message in Federation Standard. Error 404. Diplomacy not found. Prepare for humanity.exe. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings who don't identify with either term, welcome to Operation Enough Already, Quinn Nakamura announced to the assembled team. Or as I like to call it, how to make aliens regret every life choice that led them to this moment. Quinn wasn't what most people expected from Earth's most brilliant weapons designer. With perpetually disheveled hair, a lab coat covered in suspicious stains, some of which glowed faintly in the dark, and a collection of novelty coffee mugs declaring things like "I put the fun in fundamental breach of physics," he looked more like a mad scientist than a military contractor. Which, Jack supposed, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Before we begin, Quinn continued, I'd like to clarify that everything I'm about to show you is, technically speaking, completely ethical according to galactic convention. Mostly. Mostly? Jack asked. Quinn waved a hand dismissively. The Galactic Convention has 3,247 pages of rules about what constitutes a weapon but says absolutely nothing about weaponized inconvenience. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared showing what looked like a small, unassuming satellite. This, Quinn said with the pride of a parent showing off their child's finger painting, is what I call the Universal Translator Disruptor, your UTD. The Federation relies heavily on their translators for all communication. These devices don't just convert language, they also filter out concepts the Federation finds distasteful or confusing. Like what? Lieutenant Wong asked. Sarcasm for one. Metaphors. Humor that isn't based on mathematical equations, and especially Earth idioms. Quinn's grin widened. The UTD doesn't disable their translators. That would be an act of war. It simply enhances them. Enhances how? Jack asked, suddenly wary. It replaces random words with Earth slang, pop culture references, and obscure idioms from throughout human history. All technically accurate translations, just not very useful ones. Admiral Martinez, who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. Show me. Quinn activated a simulation. A Federation diplomat appeared, speaking in their native tongue. The translation came through. The Federation demands an explanation for your unprecedented violation of Protocol 43B regarding diplomatic snap. This tea is yeet. The Federation cannot even with your ceased behavior and requests you stop being such a boomer about our lit paperwork. The room fell silent, then erupted in laughter. Phase 1 of our deployment will be the Minor Inconvenience Fleet, Martinez explained once the laughter died down. Small, fast ships that will plant UTDs near every major Federation communication hub. We're not attacking them, we're just making it really, really hard for them to be insufferable bureaucrats. There's more, Quinn said, changing the hologram to meet the environmental adjustment device. Federation species evolved in very specific conditions and are extremely sensitive to minor changes in their environment. This device creates subtle modifications that aren't harmful, just annoying. Like what? Jack asked. Increases humidity by 3%. Makes surfaces slightly static clingy. Adjusts gravity by 0.2%. Creates barely audible but persistent background noises at frequencies that Federation hearing finds particularly irritating. Makes food taste slightly bland. Nothing harmful, just enough to make them feel constantly, inexplicably uncomfortable. Admiral Martinez nodded approvingly. Deploy both immediately. And what about the special package for their main council chamber? Quinn's smile turned positively devious. Oh, that's my masterpiece. We've analyzed years of council meeting recordings and identified the frequencies at which Federation species communicate subtle social cues, mostly related to status and dominance. My device will subtly alter these frequencies. What will that do? Tasha asked. Every high-ranking official will sound like they're constantly insulting everyone else's mother, questioning their competence, and suggesting they have embarrassing personal habits. Meanwhile, lower-ranking officials will sound extraordinarily confident and assertive. Their entire social hierarchy will descend into chaos, and they won't even understand why. Jack found himself grinning. So we're basically giving the entire Federation government the galactic equivalent of a bad hair day while making them talk like confused teenagers. Precisely, Quinn said. And the best part, not a single violation of any peace treaty. We're not hurting anyone. We're just being. He paused dramatically, really heady. Admiral Martinez stood. Launch the minor inconvenience fleet. It's time to show the Federation what happens when humanity decides to be creative. In orbit around Earth, 50 small ships detached from their docking stations and disappeared into FTL, carrying humanity's first non-diplomatic response to years of alien bureaucratic bullshit. The revenge of the clipboard weary had begun. The Federation's response was exactly as predicted, Admiral Martinez announced, 3 days after the minor inconvenience fleet deployment. Total confusion followed by increasingly frantic attempts to communicate with us, all of which sound like they were written by a teenager hopped up on energy drinks and memes. Jack reviewed the latest Federation transmission on his tablet. The message from High Administrator ZKR now read, "This slaps no cap far fi. Earth needs to stop ghosting the Federation, or we will yeet consequences at your civilization. We cannot even with this shade. The vibe check has failed. They've tried switching to their backup communication systems," Rahul reported, "but we got those too. Quinn's devices are working better than expected." Jack nodded. "And the environmental adjustment devices?" "Reports from our intelligence network suggest total chaos," Tasha said, unable to hide her grin. "The Federation Council can't figure out why everyone's membranes are drying out, why their ceremonial robes keep clinging to uncomfortable places, or why everyone suddenly sounds like they're insulting each other's genetic lineage." "Perfect," Jack said. "Time for Phase 2. Where's Dr. Petrov?" As if summoned by his name, the door slid open to reveal a tall, thin man with piercing blue eyes and a perpetual expression of mild amusement. Dr. Victor Petrov, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, strolled in carrying nothing but a small tablet and a cup of tea. "Commander Thornton," he said, his voice carrying a hint of his Russian ancestry. "I hear you want to drive some aliens crazy, professionally speaking, of course." "What do you have for us, Doctor?" Martinez asked. Petrov took a sip of his tea before answering. "After studying Federation psychology for 15 years, I've identified their most significant cultural taboos, social anxieties, and collective fears. We're ready to implement Operation What the Hell Is That?" He tapped his tablet, and a holographic display appeared showing a series of seemingly random objects: a purple cube, a small plant with blue leaves, a device that looked like a cross between a calculator and a potato peeler, and various other innocuous items. "These are?" Jack asked. These are nothing, Petrov said, his eyes twinkling. Absolutely nothing. Random objects with no significance whatsoever. But we're going to place them in locations where Federation officials will find them, and we're going to act like they have immense significance. I don't follow, Tasha admitted. Petrov's smile widened. The Federation species evolved as pattern recognition specialists. They're hardwired to find meaning in everything. It's why they're so obsessed with protocols and ceremonies. When they encounter something they can't immediately categorize, it causes extreme psychological distress. So we're going to… what? Leave random junk around and watch them freak out? Jonas asked. Precisely, Petrov nodded. But with a twist. Each time they find one of our objects, they'll also find a human nearby who will react to the object in a specific way with either excessive reverence or extreme disgust before quickly hiding it away and denying its existence. Jack started to laugh. They'll think we're hiding something important from them. Yes, Petrov confirmed. And Federation species cannot tolerate being excluded from information. It's their most fundamental social anxiety. Essentially, they'll become obsessed with discovering what these objects mean, why we're hiding them, and what secret advantage we might be gaining. And the best part, Martinez added, when they finally work up the courage to officially inquire about these objects, we'll act completely confused, Petrov finished. We'll insist the objects are ordinary human items with no special significance. The more they push, the more we'll act bewildered by their interest. Eventually they'll start to question their own perceptions. Psychological warfare without firing a shot, Jack mused. I like it. Oh, Petrov wasn't finished. We've also prepared specialized operations for each Federation species based on their specific cultural taboos. For the Polunians, we'll have humans publicly eating food with our hands, a practice they find revolting. For the Zoke they are. We'll stand slightly closer to them during conversations than their comfort zone allows. And for the High Council? Martinez asked. Petrov's expression turned downright mischievous. We've prepared a special reception where humans will deliberately mix up their names, titles, and accomplishments, their most deeply held status markers. We'll praise junior members while appearing unimpressed by senior officials. And by the end of the evening, they'll be questioning their entire social hierarchy. Implement immediately, Martinez ordered, and keep me updated on the results. Jack looked around the room at his team diplomats, now turned psychological warriors. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually enjoying diplomacy for once. Oh, Commander, Petrov said with a small smile, this isn't diplomacy. This is the art of driving aliens completely up the wall while maintaining plausible deniability. Across Federation space, Operation What the Hell Is That? Commenced. And for the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization began to question its collective sanity. The Grand Chamber of Bureaucratic Superiority was in chaos. Absolute chaos. Shiu. High Administrator ZTR's skin had turned a sickly yellow-green, a sign of extreme distress in his species. 3 of his sensory tentacles had tied themselves into knots, a medical condition that would require specialized surgery to correct. Order, he screeched, his translator rendering his voice as Yofan, chill, which only added to the confusion. I demand order in this chamber. No one was listening. Representatives from 500 worlds were all speaking at once, their translators spewing a bizarre mixture of formal diplomatic language and Earth slang from the past 3 centuries. These humans be trippin', shouted the Zok Thar ambassador, who was trying to maintain his dignity while constantly adjusting his ceremonial robes, which kept clinging to his exoskeleton in embarrassing ways. The problem is clearly your incompetence, said a junior clerical official to a senior diplomat, unaware that the subtle frequency changes in his voice made him sound like he was challenging the diplomat to ritual combat. In the corner, a group of Polunian bureaucrats were having a collective nervous breakdown after finding a human eating something with their hands while making direct eye contact with them. Enough. ZK finally bellowed, his voice temporarily overriding the translator glitch. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. This situation is completely unacceptable. The humans have violated. They've. He trailed off, realizing he couldn't actually point to a single regulation the humans had broken. Their ships hadn't fired a shot. They hadn't hacked any Federation systems. They hadn't even issued any threats. They just stopped being diplomatic. What exactly have they done? Asked Federation observer Zorn, the only council member who seemed relatively unaffected by the chaos. Besides making our translators malfunction and placing strange objects around our facilities. CKR's eye stalks quivered with rage. They know what they've done. Those purple cubes, those blue plants. Whatever that thing is that looks like a food processor but isn't. Have you asked them what those objects are? Zorn inquired. Of course we have. ZKTR shrieked. They pretend not to know what we're talking about. They act like we're the crazy ones. Perhaps, Zorn suggested gently, we should consider whether our response to the Colony Horizon incident was appropriate. The chamber fell silent. No one had mentioned Colony Horizon since the initial human protest. It had been classified as a resolved administrative matter and filed away in the Federation bureaucracy. What does that have to do with anything? CK Tower demanded. Everything, I suspect, Zorn said. The timing seems rather coincidental, doesn't it? We destroy their colony, dismiss it as a clerical error, and suddenly they start behaving unusually. Are you suggesting, as Zok Thar Elder sputtered, that these primitives are capable of coordinating a galaxy-wide psychological operation just because we accidentally vaporized a few thousand of their kind? 30,000, Zorn corrected. And yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. The stunned silence was broken by a Federation communications officer rushing into the chamber, his ceremonial entrance completely forgotten in his haste. High Administrator, he gasped. We're receiving a transmission from Earth. They're requesting a meeting with terms. As Zeta's color shifted from yellow-green to a pale blue of relief. Finally. They're coming to their senses. Put them through immediately. The main display activated, showing Admiral Martinez seated at a simple desk. Behind her stood Commander Thornton, Dr. Petrov, and Quinn Nakamura, all wearing expressions of polite interest that somehow managed to convey complete disdain. High Administrator, Martinez said, her voice cool and professional. The United Earth government is prepared to discuss terms for normalizing relations with the Federation. Excellent, ZK said, his translator mercifully functioning correctly for the moment. We will of course require you to submit the standard apology for diplomatic irregularities form in triplicate, followed by. No, Martinez interrupted. CK blinked his eye stalks in confusion. I'm sorry. You misunderstand, High Administrator. We're not here to apologize. We're here to present our terms. Will. Delson. Kalmar. You have exactly 1 hour to decide whether to accept them. Or what? CK demanded, his confidence returning. Despite the recent inconveniences, the Federation still held the technological advantage. Martinez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Or we deploy Phase 3. Which is? CK asked, a note of uncertainty creeping into his voice. You remember Quinn Nakamura? Martinez gestured to the disheveled scientist, who waved cheerfully. He's very creative. And he's been saving his best ideas for Phase 3. Quinn stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with the special madness that only true geniuses possess. Tell me, High Administrator, have you ever heard of glitter? Zorn, who had studied human culture extensively, turned a pale shade of horrified recognition. Accept their terms, he whispered urgently. Whatever they are, accept them immediately. The Treaty of New Understanding, as it came to be known, was signed exactly 57 minutes after Admiral Martinez's ultimatum. The Federation representatives, led by a visibly shaken High Administrator ZKR, had attempted to negotiate only once right after Quinn Nakamura's detailed presentation on what would happen if Phase 3 were deployed. And you're saying this glitter would be in their ventilation systems? Zetaar had asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Among other places, Quinn had replied cheerfully. Did you know that a single unit of glitter can replicate itself across an entire ecosystem? You'd be finding it in your food, your beds, your ceremonial robes for decades. The treaty was signed immediately after that exchange. Now, Jack Thornton stood in the same conference room where, just 2 weeks ago, Ambassador G. Thorok had dismissed the destruction of Colony Horizon as a clerical error. The difference in atmosphere was palpable. Let me make sure I understand the terms correctly, Federation observer Zorn said, the only Federation representative who seemed capable of maintaining composure. In exchange for peace, the Federation agrees to 1. Full reparations for Colony Horizon, including the establishment of a memorial and a Federation-funded colony rebuilding program. 2. The immediate revision of all Federation protocols regarding human interaction, with humans having final approval on all new procedures. 3. NTE. A formal admission that the Federation massively screwed up and should have known better than to mess with a species crazy enough to intentionally consume capsaicin for pleasure. 4. The establishment of a Don't Mess with Humans educational program to be implemented across all Federation worlds. And 5. The immediate cessation of all translator modifications, environmental adjustments, and psychological operations currently underway. Jack nodded. That's correct. And the mysterious objects? Zorn asked. Jack exchanged a glance with Dr. Petrov, who nodded slightly. The purple cubes are children's toys, Jack explained. The blue plants are artificial decorations. And that thing that looks like a food processor but isn't? It's a food processor. Zorn's eye stalks drooped in disbelief. You mean to tell me that our entire council has been driven to the brink of madness by ordinary items? Pretty much, Jack confirmed. Though the way your people reacted to them wasn't ordinary at all. Did you know 3 of your senior officials have requested permanent stress leave after finding one of our junior diplomats using a purple cube as a stress ball? Zorn made a sound that might have been a laugh if his species were capable of such expressions. I have studied humans for many cycles, Commander Thornton, but I never truly understood you until now. What do you understand? Jack asked. Is that you are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of your weapons, but because of your minds. You defeated us without firing a shot, simply by being, what is the term? Passive-aggressive? I prefer creatively non-violent, Jack said with a smile. Zorn extended a tentacle in the Federation gesture of respect. The Federation will honor this treaty, Commander. Not just because we fear your Phase 3, but because we have finally learned what you've been trying to tell us all along. That respect must be earned, not demanded through bureaucratic processes. I think we're going to get along much better from now on, Jack said, shaking Zorn's tentacle. 6 months later. The new Human Federation Cultural Exchange Center buzzed with activity. Jack watched as Federation officials carefully observed human customs, asking questions and taking notes with genuine interest rather than bureaucratic detachment. Quite a change, isn't it? Admiral Martinez said, appearing beside him. Hard to believe these are the same beings who once made us fill out a 17-page form just to request a meeting to discuss the possibility of scheduling a preliminary discussion about potentially initiating dialogue, Jack replied. Martinez nodded. Amazing what a little creative problem-solving can accomplish. Across the room, Quinn Nakamura was enthusiastically explaining the concept of hot sauce to a group of horrified but fascinated Federation scientists. Nearby, Dr. Petrov was engaged in what appeared to be a productive discussion with Zorn about cultural misunderstandings. You know, Jack said, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually enjoying diplomacy now. That's because we're not playing by their rules anymore, Martinez replied. We showed them that humans can be diplomatic, but when pushed too far, we can also be spectacularly petty. Jack raised his glass in a toast. To humanity's greatest superpower, the ability to be absolutely insufferable when necessary. Martinez clinked her glass against his, and to the Federation finally learning the most important lesson in galactic diplomacy. Which is, never mess with a species that invented both nuclear weapons and practical jokes. In the corner, A Federation junior official accidentally knocked over a container of what looked suspiciously like glitter. The ensuing panic was both immediate and absolute. Jack and Martinez exchanged a look and decided, diplomatically, to pretend they hadn't noticed. Some lessons, after all, were best reinforced through practical demonstration.